Hello everyone and welcome to another wire wrap tutorial. My name is Jim McIntosh and I'm from the Wire Art Education Center. Today's project is a really cool one. It's a bracelet and it's a cuff bracelet, but this is a more traditional style wire wrapped bracelet. So a lot of the things that you've been using and you've been taught as you've been becoming a wire artist are going to be used here. So we're not prong setting this, we're going to border set this. And the piece is done in two halves, and the two halves are then brought together. That's why I called it the two-part bracelet. We're not doing this in two stages, it's just two halves coming together to hold the piece together. So hopefully it makes a little bit of sense, but let's head over to the bench and I'll show you what we're talking about, okay? Let's go. So this is what we're going to be making. It's just a nice, simple bracelet. It's a cuff bracelet. It's got nice closed up ends on it. We've got it all centered. It's got a nice 1-inch gap here. I'm using a 25 by 18 millimeter oval shaped stone. It's a calibrated stone, so it shouldn't be too difficult for you to find it. And it's in copper. I mean, I like this carnelian. I think carnelian and copper looks really good together. And it's not hard. I mean, you may look at it and think, oh, this is going to be a difficult project to do. It isn't. There's just a lot of moving parts, and we keep all the wire together. I'll show you how to do that. It's not hard. We're going to use a lot of painter's tape to do this. But this is just the overview, just a nice little cuff bracelet. So I want you to take, and I want you to cut 12 pieces of 22 or 21 gauge, either one, they both work well, square wire. We're going to cut them to 9 inches each, and I'm going to straighten each one of these out so that they're relatively straight so we can bundle them together. So I'm just going to draw it between my fingertips to take out some of the kinks and the curls. And then I'm going to put them all together, bring the ends together. So I'm going to even up the ends here. And I'm going to square them up because we want them nice and squared up. We don't want any of them on their edge. And once I get one end together like this, gathered together, I'm going to take a piece of tape and about 1.5 inches away from the end, I'm just going to put the tape across and make a little flag. So I just brought it around, and that's going to hold that wire bundle together. Then I'm starting here at the flag. I'm just going to run my fingers up, keeping them squared and straightened out. And here towards the end, I may need to smooth them out just a little bit more, but here towards the end, about 1.5 inches away from the other end, I'm going to take and put another piece of tape. So put the tape on there, and then I will bring it around the other side so that it makes a second flag. Now notice here the wires are kind of separated in the middle. We want to be able to work with those middle wires, so just kind of run, and this, let me show you from the side what I'm doing. So I'm taking and putting a curl in and taking the curl out, and then I'm going to slowly make that disappear so that the wires are straight again. And what that does is that brings them all together. See, so now notice now the wires, instead of being gapped open, they're closer together. And that's just a good way. All you're doing is since this is dead soft wire, we're just taking some of that that tendency that it has to want to kind of splay out a little bit. We're taking that out of it and making it so that it's nice and all together. So I've done that already with this other bundle. I probably do need to kind of take that center splaying out here a little bit. But this is what I have. I have 2 bundles now, taped at the ends. There's 12 wires at 9 inches. That should give us plenty of wire to work with. The next thing we want to do is we want to find the middle of each of these wires. We want to mark them. So the halfway point would be about 4.5. So here I am at 4.5. I'm just going to make a line across the wires. 4.5 on that one. We'll set it aside for a second, and then we'll do the same over here. We will mark this one at approximately 4.5 inches. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to determine how wide of a wrap we're going to make, because this is going to be the central wrap for this. Now to understand where we're going to put it, we need to take a look at our stone. Now we're going to be putting them on either side of the stone. So this is the long end of the stone. This is a 25 by 18 millimeter calibrated cabochon. I'm going to want to use some of this on the outside of that. Now, so a lot of times I'll measure, just take my measure out here, and I'll just kind of look and see what's going to support the side of the stone. I'm thinking about 10 millimeters wide will give this stone the support it needs. So if the stone was larger, I would obviously want a larger, wider central point here, this main wrap on the side, but I'm only going to do a 10 since this is a smaller stone. If I was doing like a 40 by 30 millimeter, 40 being the long end, I might opt to maybe go with something like a maybe 20 or in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 somewhere, but this one we're only going to do a 10 millimeter wide wrap here. So what I've done is I've taken that center mark that we made, I zeroed it in here at 5. I put the 5 millimeter here, and then I made a mark at 0 and I made a mark at 10. And I'll do the same thing with this second one. Is I'm going to center that on the 5 millimeter, then I'm going to make a mark across them at 0, and then I will make a mark here at 10. Now that should give us plenty of room to do this first wrap. So take off about 6 inches of half round wire. This is 21 gauge half round wire, and I'm going to use my wire wrap pliers to make this wrap here. So I'm going to take my wire wrap pliers, I'm going to put it on the left mark that I made. I'm going to wrap this. I'm going to take the wire, I'm going to insert it here between the jaws. There we go. And then I'm going to start my wrap. I'm going to count my wraps, and here's the reason why. I want this side to look exactly like the other side. So to keep them looking correct, I'm going to count. So that was 1, here's number 2, 3, there's number 4. So I'm going to kind of smush them together, and I'm going to set them in place. So that was 4. So now we can just continue going. Here's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Push them down a little bit. I'm going to set these 2. So that was 9. I'm just going to set those into place. There's 10. 11, and it looks like we're going to stop. I'm going to stop here at 12. So I'll set these ones I just made into place. Make sure everybody's together there, and then I'm going to cut off my excess. I always cut my excess on wire bundles like this about the middle of the bundle. So no matter how many wires you have here, I always go with the middle of the bundle. Okay, so we're going to do this, trim these off a little bit, make sure they're pushed down, and then I'm just going to repeat this step with the second bundle. And there's 12. So we've we've got 12 wraps on this second one as well. So these should both match up really well. And trim off the excess. Once I got the excess trimmed off, I'm just going to push those ends down. So now we have two sections of wire with the center of them wrapped. The next thing we need to do is we need to start forming these around the stones. Now this is why we call it a 2-half bracelet, cuff bracelet, because we're going to take these two halves and we're going to join them around the outside of the stone. So we need to get the stone's relative shape. So take your stone, and we're going to tape it to our work surface. So I'm going to take a piece of tape and I'm going to tape it to my work surface. That's so it doesn't move around. These carnelians, I'm using a carnelian here. It's kind of slippery. And this will just help you get that basic shape. And we can refine the shape as we go. So I'm going to center the wrap at I have my stone long ways. It's in the center of the stone, and all I'm going to do is I'm just going to center it there. I'm going to just bring the two halves around the stone and make this horseshoe shape. Now, like I said, we're going to refine this as we go. Okay, so that's one. Let's do the same thing with the other. Now, make sure that when you do this, that you've got the cut ends. This is the cut ends of my wire wrap here. That's against the stone because we want to hide these against the stone. So I'm just going to bring the two halves around like that. And see how I'm just kind of refining it. Now you want to make sure that it's centered on here, which this one does. There we go. It seems like it's a little uncentered there. Okay, that's good. So now we can remove the stone. We don't need it taped to our work surface because we're going to do a few other things to it here. Set our stone aside. And I want to double check it and make sure that it's in here and it's nice and rounded. Now, we want to make a bend on the top and the bottom. Now I've got the stone with the wrap on the left side. And what we want is we want a wrap that's going to come here and here. So that means we have to well, we have to move these end wires. We got to make them so that they come out this way so that we have a nice bracelet. A good way of doing that is to actually mark it where the top and the bottom of the stone is. So when you have this frame around it centered correctly and everything, just kind of make your mark just as a guide. It looks like about the top, and do one here at the bottom. This will just give us an idea as to where we're going to be making some bends. So taking either flat nose pliers or your wire wrap pliers, put it on the outside. Notice here I'm right on the outside of that mark that I just made, and I'm just going to bend it upwards. See, so this is going to now be one of the arms for the bracelet. And I'm going to do the same thing here at the bottom. I'm going to position my pliers just outside and then make a bend. So now I should be able to set this around my stone here, and it should be pretty close to where I want my bends to be. Now we're going to refine this a little bit more as we work on it, but this just gives us that basic idea as to where we're going to do it. So we'll just do the same thing with this second one. Okay, so that should, so now they're kind of weird looking here, so let's kind of straighten them out because we want these to lay flat around the stone. So now we can kind of position everything where we're going to want it. Same with this one. See how it's bent funny? So we want to kind of straighten that out a little bit. We're going to probably have to do a little bit of adjusting, but let me show you what we should kind of be getting here. So you should have two halves that will now go around the stone, like so. So when you match the two sides up, now you're going to have to notice though, this bottom wrap here is off ever so slightly. And that's the part we're going to, now I've got them lined up. So if I take and I put these two halves together, and here I'm going to take another piece of tape, and I'm going to put it on just one side where I've got them matched up. So I've got these two sides matched up pretty well. I'm going to take a piece of tape, and notice I've given myself about an inch away from that. I'm going to do that because this will allow me, that's the correct side, that side's going to work out really well. So now if we take the two sides that we've got bent, now I've kind of had to play with this because you need to move things around so that this is actually at the top of that arch that we've made, so that it is on the side. And you want both of these to match up. So I've got the two sides, I've got both of these are matched up in the same spot, all my bends are in the same place. And you just kind of have to move things around just a little bit. And all I did was I took my pliers and I just moved this bend. So you may have to move it in or out, meaning you may have to unbend it and rebend it at certain points in order to get this to go around here evenly. And that's important because you don't want these two sides to be mismatched. Once you have that, we're going to do one other thing. We're going to take the tape off these outside parts because we're not going to be using all of these wires in this next step. So remove those flags on both sides. And put your, so this is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to take the bottom two wires from this bundle, and I'm going to separate them out. We're not going to be using these. So here are these two. Whoops, here's one, and here's, let me grab the second one. There we go. Just going to separate them out, like so. Do the same thing down here. I'm going to separate the bottom two from both sides of the wrap. Okay. Now that we have this, what we can do is we can take a piece of tape and we're going to secure the two sides together. Now, I understand. I know you think, oh, I'm going through so much tape, but trust me, this will help in putting this together. So I've got these two sides matched up, lined up really well, and I'm going to take a piece of tape and I'm going to make a flag about an inch or so away from where they come together, because we're going to put a wrap here and we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So just kind of get your tape, get everything lined up how you want it, and then secure your tape. And now the same thing over on this side. You want to bring the two sides together. There we go. And about an inch or so away, I'm going to put this piece of tape. So this is going to hold the two sides together. So now look at what we've got. These two are going to be used for something else, but this center section we're going to be able to wrap now. And we're going to start the wrap where they come together. So at these points here, and we're going to work our way out towards the outside. So cut off another 6-inch piece of half round, and we're going to start, I'm going to start here on this left side. And I'm going to, or on the right side rather, but see now, notice when I put the wire wrap pliers in here, or anything I'm going to be starting this, I'm not exactly here at where they come together. And that's fine, because what we're going to do is we're going to make about 4 wraps, and then we're going to push it in towards the center. All right, so insert your wire wrap wire into your wire wrap pliers, and I want you to bring it around. Make sure you miss these outside ones, and just make 4 wraps. So there's 1. And here is number 2. 3. And number 4. Okay. Then just slide it down until it comes to that bend point. Now you may have to take your pliers and kind of help it, give it a little nudge here. And once you get it put where you want it, then just set it into place. Okay? And that will help keep everything straight and where you want it. So there's 4. I'm going to do 4 more. So here's 5, number 6, 7, and 8. Now, they are kind of wonky looking, so I'm going to fix that. I'm going to take them and bring them all together and then push them down. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side over here. And something I found helpful was I actually pushed these wires up a little bit higher so I could get some access to it. I had to actually redo this one because I had spun the wire, and so that's something you have to be careful of, is not to twist the wire. I had the flat side showing on half of it, so don't do that. So let me catch up with you guys, and I will do this second side right quick. So this is what we have so far. Now, these 2 that I have here that are sticking away, I'm considering those the bottom of the piece. Okay, that's my bottom of it. So I have all of my wires, these wire wrap ends, they're out at the bottom. So we need to do something with those. And what I like to do is, you see where the 2 halves come together, and let me kind of point here. Let me grab something to kind of show you. Now, this area right in here, I'm going to take this wire end and I'm going to kind of bend it and hide it in there. So bring it to the middle. I'm going to go through and I'm just going to kind of grab it and secure it inside the center of these 2, and then I'm going to trim it short and tuck it in. And this is easier said than done, so it just takes a little bit of doing, so just be careful. So there, I just trimmed that off. And I'm just going to take my pliers and I'm just going to kind of push that end in there. And I'm going to do the same thing here with my other end, the small end. I'm going to grab it, I'm going to push it into the center. I'm going to line it up there in the middle. Okay, let's trim it short. And this will be so that it doesn't really bother anybody. Won't rub up against them. And then I'm just going to take my pliers and I'm just going to kind of push it in there. And that's going to be hidden away. Now, what should we do with these ends, these other ends? Well, you've got a couple of decisions you can make here. You can trim them short right where they are and leave them on the sides, which is good. Or you could take the 2 halves and hide it in the middle like we did, tuck it in the middle. But for me, I do like to kind of trim it on the side, kind of short, not very short, but about halfway in, halfway the width of this, and I just kind of do that, and then I just make sure that it's not scratchy or won't scratch anybody and hurt anybody. But if it does, then I'll just file it down. But let's trim this in now. There we go. Now we got both ends trimmed. So our stone should now fit in the piece, just like that. But now we need to secure the stone in there, and that's what we'll do right now. So before we can start bending some of these wires for the stone, we need to remove this tape because we want these wires to kind of move a bit. So just remove the tape from both sides. Don't worry, it's plenty secure now that you've got it wrapped. Got it wrapped in a couple of different spots. So we want to make a place for the bottom to sit. Now, remember, we aren't using these wires yet. We're going to use these wires that are part of this bundle to hold the stone in place. So, position here at the bottom wire of this wrapped bundle and just give it a little bend towards the center. So all I'm doing is I'm holding the wire and then I'm bending it to the center. Let me show you that again. I may have been out of frame for that. So I'm going to take this other side now. I'm grabbing the bottom wire just outside the wrap. Notice where I've got it, just so there's no confusion. And then I'm just going to give it just a twist toward the center. See, now look at what I've done. So this is going to make a little seat for the stone to sit. Well, now I'll do the same thing over here. I'm going to grab the bottom wire. Make sure you have one wire, not two. I've done it. I've made the mistake of actually pulling two of them in there. If you have trouble with that, separating out that wire, I would use just a little. I have this paring knife. You can get a bench knife too. It's a jeweler's tool, but I just use this thin little paring knife that I've had forever. You can see how dinged up it is, and I just kind of will put it in between the wires that I want to, the wire I want to separate out. I will put this in between those carefully, and I will kind of just move it out of the way. See, so I've got the blade in there, and I'll just kind of pull it up a little bit so that it separates, and then I can get my pliers on here and do that twist. And I do this with my pendants that I make, everything I make with using wire wrapping. I will a lot of times use that. So now there should be a nice little seat for your stone to sit. See, so if you put the stone in the setting, there, now it should not move. It's sitting in there nice and secure. And we need to do the same thing now for the top of the stone. Now, if you've watched my wire wrap pendant video, the basic pendant, or if you've done wire wrapping very often, I usually just kind of get under there with my fingertip and my fingernail rather, and I push it over the stone. This is where you can kind of take a little bit of, artistic license, so to speak, and make a piece that you want, something that's going to be interesting to you, that you think your customers or your family, whoever you're giving this to, would like. And again, I'm going to use my paring knife to separate out this, and be careful not to stab yourself. I've done that too. So I'm just going to separate that wire away, and I'm going to do a design very similar to what I just did. And you can refine your designs as you go so that it looks like the way that you want it to. And this wire, you need a little bit more of a bend over the stone. I'm going to grab this top wire again, separate it out there, and then I will put a bend in it where I want the bend to be. There we go. And that's kind of the look I'm wanting. Is I just want these to be just over the stone, just there we go. Okay. This one's not how I want it yet, so I'm going to play around with this just a little bit more. Okay. So there, we've got the stone covered on the top and it's covered on the bottom, so nothing should be moving out of place. Next thing we need to do is we need to separate the two halves of this because we're going to be making these into the bracelet arms. So again, I'm going to use a paring knife to get in between there, and all I'm doing is separating them out. So you want them to be like this. So I've got them separated, and starting at the top, I'm going to bring a wire from each side back to the center. So the top one is the first one. I'm going to bring it to the middle on each side. And we're going to fan these out. So then I'm going to put this one next to it, one on each side. And then the next one, one on each side. And then the last one. And what we've done is we fanned these out so that we can now bring them all together and make the arm of the bracelet. See, so I've fanned them out. So notice when here it comes out, they're all joined together, and now they fan out into the bracelet arm. And when I get that, I'm going to bring them all together, and then I will take a piece of tape, and I'm going to just here towards the end, I'm just going to put a flag just so that it stays where I want it. And I'll do the same thing over here. I'm going to separate the two halves, so make sure you get the wires separated from each other. There. And I'm going to flatten them all together, making sure that I keep them fanned out in the order that they should be in. Sometimes you got to double check and make sure nothing's crossed over in an odd spot. And the sad thing is you won't notice that you've got it wrong until you've finished. Once you finish and you realize, oh, I've got two wires crossed over one another. Okay, so those all look correct. Oops. Yeah, there we go. So let's take a piece of tape and we will bring them all together here towards the end. And hold them all in place. So there we go. Now we can do something with these wires. These wires, since they're all separated from one another, let's do just a little bit of housekeeping here. Let's kind of make sure I've got everything flat where I want it. See, sometimes you can take these wires and give them a little squeeze here towards where they come out, because we're going to place a wrap there. So these wires here we need to straighten out. Sometimes you get a little bit of a kink in it, so you can kind of smooth that kink out just slightly. And we're going to do the same thing with these, but we're going to incorporate them here with these. So we're going to fan these out just a little bit. And I'm just kind of, since this is dead soft wire, that's a good thing about using dead soft wire is I can take some of these kinks out and move everything where I want it. So there. So we're just going to join this now in with the rest of the arm, and we're going to wrap that together. We just want to bring these sides in so that we can use them, and then we can give them a better shape after we wrap them together. So get your wires nice and straight. Okay, so now that I've got this side nice and straight how I want it, right here, I'm going to take a piece of tape. I'm going to tape all of the wires together now. Now notice I'm going kind of about 1.5 inches away from where this wrap comes out, and that's where I'm going to tape them all together, because where they all come together here, where everything becomes flat right in here, that's where I'm going to put a wrap. So I don't want this tape interfering with that. Okay, so that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to place a wrap right in here. Let's do that now. So before moving on, I wanted to point something out, and that is these wires that we bent down and we've rejoined, that we're going to now wrap and bring in. They do take a little bit of work at straightening them out, and I did some of it off camera, but this is kind of the shape that we're looking to get. If you notice, this center is we're just looking for something subtle. I mean, just goes across the wrist. Some of these bends, a lot of this bend that's in here that we've used, we're going to be taking some of that out as we manipulate this, but try to get a nice, get it straightened out, I guess I should say, as best as you can, and we can continue to work and maneuver things around. But the important thing is that we get them straightened out and centered, and a lot of this is going to come out. You'll see how some of these bends come out as we work with it. Okay, so let's go ahead now. We're going to place a wrap right here and right here on this, and we're only going to put, I'm going to put about 10 wraps on each side. So pull off a piece of my half round wire, and again we'll start with our wire wrap pliers, put them where we want the wrap. Now the thing you need to be cautious of when doing this particular wrap is that you don't pull the wires in so that they bunch up like this, and so that they don't also cross over each other. You want to make sure this is a strong wrap, a tight wrap, but you also want to make sure that it is not bunched up. So there's 2, and here's number 3. Now, to make sure, actually that's 2 wraps, to make sure that this doesn't bunch up, slide that in place here. You want to really give it a good squeeze. And now notice I started this on the front. It's easy to fix. Let's put it to the back here. There, so now it's on the back. So now we have 3 whole wraps, and I've straightened it out so that it's not crossing over here. So it's 3, so here's number 4, 5, 6, and every once in a while you want to make sure you've got everything straightened out. There. 7, 8, 9, and 10. And I'm finishing on the back, and I'm going to flatten these down with my pliers just to make sure nothing is out of place. Now on this particular one, I'm pulling these kind of in a little bit also, just to make sure I've got it nice and done. Oops, there we go. Now, cutting off these ends is a little different, and normally we would cut this halfway, half the width of the wire bundle. This particular one, we're only going to cut this so that it covers about 2 or 3 of those wires. And the logic behind it, see, I've cut it rather short. I'm going to cut even shorter. I'll cut just a little bit more. The logic behind this is that with this shorter end, it's going to make a stronger edge on here, a stronger end. And it won't pop up and it won't scratch anybody. So I just kind of cut it, and trust me, it's been a couple of years I've been trying to figure that out, why it works. I still have yet to figure out, but it has something to do with the pressure that is put on the end. So there, I've cut these, and now I'm just going to set it down. Now, something else that you can do is get out your bench block, put that wrap on the bench block, and take a rawhide mallet and hammer it a couple of times. That will add strength to this when you hammer that. That's going to add some hardening to this wire in this area. So that's always a good idea. So now I'm going to do the same thing here on the other side. So this is what we've got. This is our piece up to this point. We've got our wraps on each of these sides. Everything's looking pretty good. Got everything nice and even. Just want to push those together a little bit better here. See, and that's something you need to always be doing as you're working, is just continue to look at various parts of it and just make sure that it's where you want everything. Now we've got most of our wraps. We just have 2 more wraps to do, and that's going to be at our wrap ends. But the next thing we need to do is I want you to flip the stone over and put it on its face. And you need to determine now how big of a bracelet that you're going to be making. We're making a cuff bracelet. Cuff bracelet just is going to fit around the person's wrist. So if you measure the wrist, and let's say in this case I'm going to make this a 6 for somebody who has a 6-inch wrist. I'm only going to make it 5 inches wide. Why? Because a cuff bracelet needs a little bit of a space to be able to get in. And normally that's hidden here on the bottom of the wrist. Is usually about a 1-inch space. And that's what we want to do here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this a 5-inch so that it fits a 6-inch. So half of 5 is 2.5. So I've centered my my ruler here in the center of this at 5.5 inches. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my Sharpie, and I'm going to make a mark at 5 inches here on the right. Let's see, I hit it, knocked it over a little bit. Let's see here, there we go. So 5 inches here, I'm going to mark one side. And then notice my tape is in the way almost over here. It's just outside the tape, thankfully, but if the tape is in the way, you can take these outside pieces of tape off. And actually that's what I end up doing, but right there where the tape is the 0. So that's how big I'm going to be making this, and that's where I'm going to be placing 2 more wraps. So let's take this tape off, get it out of the way, because we're going to start these final wraps at these marks that we've just made, and we're going to work from the mark toward the stone. From the mark towards the stone. So 2 more wraps to do, and I'm only going to make about 5 or 6 wraps here. So I'll get my half round wire, get my wire wrap pliers. I'm going to take my wire wrap pliers and I'm going to put them here where I'm going to start. And we're going to start wrapping from there. So I'm going to hold it. And that's what's good about these wire wrap pliers, is they will hold your metal in place while you wrap, so that it also prevents your piece from bunching up too much. So we're going to start here, and we're going to make 5 wraps. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to make 6 actually. Let's do 1 more. There we go. So we're going to start this. Now notice I marked on the inside of this, and I'm wrapping on the inside of this. And I've just done 6 wraps. I'm going to bring the wrap down to my mark, and then I'm going to set it in place. Give it a nice squeeze. Pull again, we're going to do something a little bit different on this one. This inside wrap, this one's closest to the inside, we're going to make it short, but not quite as short as we did on these other ones. See, I left just a little bit of this on there, and that's going to be fine because what we're going to do is we're going to bend these wire ends up over this wrap. So it's going to hide the wrap, but it's going to hold the wrap in place as well. But we definitely want to make it slightly longer, so maybe about a third of this there. Okay, and then again, you want to give it a couple of taps. That's good. So I've got the cut side down, and I'm going to hit it a few times with my mallet, and then I'm going to go over to this other side, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to make 6 wraps, starting at my mark and working my way toward the stone. So those are all the wraps that we need to put on this. So I wanted to take just a minute, and I wanted to thank all of my members because they're the ones that have made it possible for this video and for all of my videos coming up. So thank you, thank you, thank you. These are all of those people that have been helping out so far. And if you want to become a member, just hit the join button below, or there's also a link in the description, and it helps you to become a member and support this channel. And also I want you to think about becoming a creator member on there, because as a creator, we give you a whole lot of additional videos that aren't available to the public. Lots of extra tutorials and other tidbits of information to help you be a better artist. So let's get back to the project. The last thing we need to do, not the last thing, but the second to last thing, should I say, take this end tape off on both ends. You shouldn't have any tape on your piece anywhere. There we go. Now, the last thing we need to do before we actually shape this is we need to bend these wire ends up over the wrap. And I start right here at the wrap, and I start to gently bend these. So notice how I'm doing this. I'm just taking pieces at a time here, and I'm going to bend it. Just trying to get this in camera range so you guys can see there. So I've bent this in half. Now what I want to do is I want to trim these so they extend just past the wrap. So I am going to start, and it's always best to start too long and trim to make them shorter, but cut just a few of them at a time. You don't want to break your pliers. See, so this is what notice I'm just a little bit farther past there. I probably just trim just a hair more, just so that it's just barely past that wrap. There. Now when you get it to where you want it, take your pliers and notice I've got the top jaws up here. I'm just going to kind of use that to stabilize it, but I'm going to push the bottom jaws in to close that curl, to close that loop. And I'll do the same thing and do that all the way down. And I want a nice curl here, a nice tight curl. There. This is what you want. So what that's going to do is that's going to make it so that it does not rub up against the wearer by kind of tucking those in. It kind of fixes all of that. See, so this is what we've got there. So I'm going to do the same thing over here. Okay, so that's what we've got right here. Isn't that great? Nice little piece. Now we're on to the last thing we're going to do. Now, you need something to shape this into a bracelet. And a lot of people will get a bracelet mandrel, a nice big piece of steel. It's usually round. But I want you to notice that your wrist isn't round. Your wrist is actually kind of an oval shape. And so just think of it that way. You may want to use this thick end of your ring mandrel to start your curve. That will help you start here at the outside and you just curve each arm. Some people have something that will, a pair of pliers that have a big piece on it that will do that. What I did was I went to the hardware store and I got this. This is actually a replacement pick handle, and it's oval in shape. Let's see if I can get that on camera to show you. It's oval shaped, see? So it's similar to a wrist. And I just measured out different measurements here. And you want to make it kind of small. So since I said I was making mine a 5.5, I'm going to actually bring it all the way down here towards the end. Here's 6 1/8. So I'm thinking about 5 is down about here. And I can always fix that, but I'm just going to bend each of these arms around here to give it the basic shape. And then I can refine that shape by doing it by hand. Here, refining the shape of this so that it conforms to the wrist much better. And now I can go back and I can kind of do some of this bending and moving around and cleaning up. Now you'll notice that a lot of this oddly shaped work that we did on there has been taken out. And there are a few places where there's some scratches. That's my fault. I can always polish that out, buff it out with a polishing tool on my Dremel. And I can finish up some of this housekeeping here to kind of get my lines straight how I want them. Now that everything is in place where I want it, I'm not going to be doing any more bending or moving of any of these parts, so these are all good to move around. But this is what we ended up with. This is a nice little bracelet. It may have seemed like it was a lot of work and a lot of difficulty, but really, once you get accustomed to moving and bending some of these various parts, it becomes very easy to work with this and to make this bracelet. I really like making this project. This is a nice, really creative and different way of creating a cuff bracelet. And I'm sure that hopefully you enjoyed it. But I like making these. They're really good to make as bespoke pieces or as custom pieces for someone because of how it's created. You can make one that'll fit that person perfectly. And so hopefully you enjoyed it. I want you to make a lot of these and leave me a message down in the comments area and let me know what you thought of this. A lot of you are giving some great comments and I appreciate hearing from you, and I try my very, very best to respond to all of your comments on there. So thanks for stopping by. And again, my name is Jim McIntosh, and I want you to remember, practice, practice, practice.